Okay, great. Well, firstly, thank you for those attending, and to my fellow panelists, thanks for agreeing to bring your expertise to the table. We really appreciate it. And then just to James McNabb for agreeing to join us very last minute. Unfortunately, Eslam was not able to attend due to not being able to get a visa. So thanks for filling in very, very last minute. When Telemedia reached out to me and said, please could I do a session on the African continent, I mean, on Africa when it came to DCB, I decided that I'm going to speak exactly to that question, in that the idea that because I am located in South Africa, a region in Africa, that I would be able to speak for the rest of Africa. And it's certainly not the case. And it's something that I face on a daily basis when it comes to new customers looking to enter the African market, that there is this assumption that because I'm based in South Africa, that I've got this plug-and-play solution into the entire continent, which kind of speaks to Africa is not a country. There are, I think, 54 countries within the region, and very, very, very much diverse and different from one to the next. So what I decided to do is bring together a panel of people who have entered into various African territories to showcase how different the approaches are for those territories, that there certainly isn't a one-size-fits-all. But before we start off with some questions, I think if we could maybe just, starting with Rick and working back to me, if everyone can just do a little bit of an intro about who you are, who you work for, and etc.
Thanks, Jax. Ricardo Vallero, pretty much been in the industry for the last 24 years. A focus on South Africa, Africa, been on the aggregator side, been on the content business side, payment sides. Quite a long experience focusing on South Africa, but also quite a lot in sub-Saharan Africa.
Thanks, Rick. My name is Anzelle Robertson. I have spent 12 years in the greater mobile billing industry. I started as an attorney specializing in mobile payments in South Africa, then worked for a payment aggregator in South and Southern Africa, so that's the actual billing aggregation side, and then worked for a digital content services provider as their director for Africa, so it was all very African focused, and now work for the Mobile Ecosystem Forum, which is a global member organization, but still my roots and expertise lie in the African market. And at the Mobile Ecosystem Forum, I'm the program director for direct carrier billing, digital content, and advertising.
Hello everyone, I'm James McNabb. I'm director at Basebone. I've been in the industry for probably nigh on 25, 26 years now. I've worked with aggregators, I've worked for aggregators, I've worked directly with the networks. I'm originally started in Europe. I'm relocated down to South Africa about 11 years ago, and I run pretty much Africa and the Middle East from Cape Town. And I also sit as chair of the self-regulatory body in South Africa of WASPA, and I've been on their board for the past 12 years, so I've got intricate detailings of how the market works within Africa, but we also operate in Kenya and, as I say, across the Middle East.
Brilliant. Thanks. And then just from me, I'm Jacqui Jones. I am the CEO of a company called Worldpay. We operate in the South African region, and we specialize in DCB services. Okay, so let's get going. Rick, you are in multiple African territories. When looking at a new territory to go into, from a strategy perspective, what would you say the things are that you look at? So do we go direct? Do we use an aggregator? So what are the strategies? What are the things that you decide? Okay, this is how we're going to approach the market. This is the strategy we're going to take. If you could just decide, explain to everyone how different, say, for example, the South African market is, you're approaching the South African market perhaps to the Kenyan market.
It's a challenging one because, the markets across Africa are so diverse. A lot of thought and research goes into how we approach a market. As Sam, we are adamant about using data to make decisions. We use a lot of the platforms like the MPLO, MCP platforms to get as much market insight as possible. And then it's understanding the dynamics in the market. So certain countries are very difficult to go direct unless you want to set up a local presence. And then it's rather working through a trusted partner. And I think that's one of our core strategies as Sam Media. It's to have relationships with partners that we can trust and that we can do business with.
Okay, all right. And would you say that there is, I mean, obviously there is benefit to being direct, but what are some of the benefits to using a local aggregator in those particular territories versus trying to sort of operate your connection from abroad?
I think that, well, there are a few things that come into play over there. Largely it's scale. Having a local partner, I mean, a common thing in a lot of African markets is withholding tax.
Yes.
If you've got a local partner, they facilitate all that for you. So you're going to make sure that you get your money out. Again, going back to the whole strategy, it's very important choosing that right partner. Yes. Nigeria, which is a buzz market, it has been for a couple of months now. Loads of companies that offer aggregation services over there, not a lot of them facilitating the payment component.
Yes.
So they'll say, oh yeah, you can get your money,
yes.
But you need to go facilitate that payment by yourself.
Okay.
And that's the kind of partnerships that we're looking for. The networks generally don't like to play that part. They stick to the regulations, and as a business, we need to decide which is the best way for us to make an impact in the market.
Okay. And where do you source this information? And maybe Mef, maybe you can assist with that. So if I'm a new potential company wanting to move into Africa, and Rick's now mentioned, you know, the possible problems with payments, facilitation, et cetera, would you as MEF be able to assist with that information?
Yeah, sure. So before I get to what we as MEF would do, as a mobile ecosystem forum would do now, just to go back to what Rick just said about choosing partners in Africa, when I was wearing that hat as a business developer, bringing digital content to various African markets, that same approach, but then I always try to find a local aggregator that's incentivized personally to help me make a success of my business as a digital content provider.
Yeah.
Because there's aggregators and there's aggregators, right? Some of them are, we know them, the big name listed gateways that are listed somewhere else in Europe or in London or whatever, that happen to have a branch and binds and direct connects in whatever African market. But ultimately, the decision makers there are people earning a salary. If you find what I like them to call your boutique local gateway, should be the guy that started his own business, whose kids are going to school off the income that's coming from, because he has every incentive to try and help you exactly make it work and to work together to try and find, you know, anyway. Yeah. So your question, you're entering in your African market, what can the mobile ecosystem forum do to help? One of the things we do for our members is provide insight. So that means two things. I can see Benito smiling because this was also yesterday morning's presentation for me. Sorry for the repetition. But the Mobile Ecosystem Forum conducts annual surveys over various markets globally, pretty much everyone you can think of, and it gives our members the possibility to log in online the same way you would do if you had an account with a Juniper Research or an Omdia, which are expensive, and bless them, they're good companies. But to a great extent, we offer a lot of that same information, a lot of that data available globally on payments specifically to our members within our web portal. So members can go in there and toggle and say, I want to know the smartphone penetration rate of, you know, whatever, Burkina Faso, or the operator share, and it'll all be there, little pie charts that you can download for your presentations or whatever. Brilliant. That's one way. And the other way, that's perhaps a bit more nuanced and something that I personally like doing, is many of our members operate in Africa or wish to, but don't yet have, and when I say members, I mean digital content provider members, merchants. They don't necessarily have a presence on the ground yet. They don't necessarily have a team there, so they're running this from wherever in Southeast Asia or Europe. We would then attend regulatory meetings, for example, the WASPA meetings, the South African regulator, WASPAG in Ghana or whoever, RCEP, Burkina Faso, we would speak to the regulators on behalf of all of our members, gather information, understand what's happening in the codes of conduct locally, and feed that back to our members to go, be aware that where it says the pricing should be adjacent to the call to action, it means this or whatever.
Yes, brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. James, Basebone. Now, Basebone are in multiple territories across Africa, some direct, some through aggregation, et cetera, some territories you even offer aggregation. When you're approaching a new territory, what are some of the things you look at, and what would be your advice for someone looking to move into African regions, and where should they start?
Well, there's a plethitude of things that you've got to look at. I mean, Ricky was saying it's all about trust. It's finding partners that can do it. Anzelle just made a point about boutique aggregators. They're all good and well until greed becomes part of it, and you do find those local aggregators that have children in schools, businesses, actually just disappear with the money. So you've got to do, KYC is so important now. It probably wasn't 10 years ago, but you have to do KYC on your directors of companies. Are they linked to anything else? What are they doing? So that you can choose the right partner. And then you've got to look at the contractual terms of what they're offering. I think that's vitally important. The amount of contracts that have appeared on my desk that have no payment terms written into them, or they have ridiculous liability, or they insist on retaining ID codes at network level and such like, that isn't in the nature of doing partnership business. You need to have what's the cycle of payments. You need to be able to expand your own business without issues, and you need to be able to ensure that it's working regulatory and the liabilities of what is sitting there with the regulator side. Then you have to deal with the regulations and what goes on in the market. That's vitally important. Like for South Africa is very, very simple because we have WASPA and there's a code of conduct, and whether you're directly connected or whether you're coming through an aggregator, you have to be a member of WASPA in some format or another. But you go to somewhere like Kenya and you're doing it direct, you have to sign the code of ethics from the Communications Authority, and that's linked to the network contract. And they're sparse. It's like, you're not allowed to do this. If you want to go direct in certain markets, it could take you 2-3 years before you even get live. Nigeria is a very good example. It takes 3 years to set up a company. You can't converse with a network operator or start the contractual proceedings with a network operator until the NCC have issued your license and that you've gone through one of the 10 aggregators there, because you can still be direct, but you have to go through a billing partner. And by the time you actually get to doing business, the market's changed.
Yes.
And Nigeria has been a buzz keyword for...
You're really selling
Yeah.
it to the crowd, right? Yeah,
No, but-
it is great.
You know, but but then once you're in, it can be successful.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think that kind of sums it up for Africa at the moment. It's you can take a calculated risk, but it's always a risk in Africa. So you can know your partners, but there's still that unknown in Africa that you have to take the risk.
Yes. Yes.
And be it going through partners that you know, partners that you know that it's going to be difficult to get the money out.
Yes.
But that's where Africa is still very dynamic. It's not a European market where everything is very structured.
Yes.
There is still a lot of opportunity over there.
Yeah.
It's a lot harder to work for.
Yes.
It requires a lot
Yes.
more work, but you can make it work.
Absolutely. And so certainly from my position, as I said earlier, one of the things that I constantly deal with is the question of, do Worldpay operate in all African territories simply because I am in South Africa? And, it's so important to even fine-tune not only per country, but how strong the partner is per network. I certainly am not strong on all the networks within South Africa, And I know when you're coming into a market, the fewer resources that are required is always seems to be the approach. Like, let me connect with one aggregator in this territory, it's the easiest, or let me connect with this aggregator across 5 territories, because it seems sort of the easier way to go, and it's not always the best way to go. You really, really, really need to tune in, and you need to understand that we might be strong in this territory, but not in that territory. We might be strong on that network and not on another network. And if you are going to make the investment to go into an African territory, do your homework, understand who the right partners are, right down to the network, not just to the region. Because it isn't a one-size-fits-all. It really isn't. And I think if you are going to make a decision to go into African territories, really do your homework. You've got companies like MEF, you've got companies like MCP, who, on their scanner tool, you can see what sort of products are being offered, what network is dominating in that region, the volumes when it comes to sort of the ads that are being served, the fraud in those territories. So if you are looking for information about the types of products, the networks that dominate per region, you've got tools like VeriScanner, you've got MEF that can help you with the information. Yes, Anzelle.
But Jax, it's something I've also seen a couple of times. It's not just about doing the research, because we know what content providers sometimes do, or mostly do, right? They've got a checklist when you're reviewing potentially going into a new market. So you'll have a junior or mid-level commercial person gathering all that information. They'll come to the senior person within your organization and say, this is the research I've done on market X. And then they start going through a sort of checklist where they go, what's the flow? Does this aggregator you're proposing have all the carriers? Because we'd rather do one integration and we immediately have all the carriers than have that. Is the flow whatever that CP is good in, or whatever they'll choose? Can we do affiliation? Not do we only do direct media buying, whatever. So they go through their little checklist. If I can give one piece of advice to someone that hasn't gone into Africa and wants to, take that checklist and throw it in the trash. Because whatever those rules are, we want a 3-month break even, we want an aggregator that covers all operators, we want a 2-click flow, whatever. Those things are not, they might be what you're looking for in France or in Europe or in Spain or in Singapore, but it's not necessarily what's going to make it work for you in Thailand. If that junior is coming to you with an API that says the flow has USSD in it, or it's an MO that triggers a USSD push, don't go, oh, this is crap, we don't want this flow. People in the market are used to using USSD as a bearer, for example, so it's up to you to go and figure out how to actually get that flow to convert. Don't just look at it and go, oh, this doesn't fit the checklist, goodbye.
Yeah. And because it didn't work in your territory doesn't mean it's not going to work in one of ours.
Yeah, exactly.
Because USSD is still incredibly strong in many African territories, and we use it on a daily basis. So it's certainly, I agree. Thank you, Anzelle. That's very, very good information. It certainly is the case, is to understand what flows are being used, what phones are being used, what the smartphone penetration is in those territories, et cetera, et cetera. And that brings us to content. Another thing that I always laugh about is when new potential customers come to me and say, well, we've got African content. So I'm like, okay, well, what does that mean to you? What does African content mean to you? Because there are 54 countries within Africa, about, I think, 3,000 different languages are spoken in Africa. So what does that mean? And that's another thing when it comes to doing your homework. Make sure you understand the language differences per territory, the types of content, and that's where tools will help, the requirements from the networks as to what languages you need to have that content in. Thankfully, English is accepted in a lot of places, but in some networks not. So when you are offering services, you do need to have it in French or whatever the local language is, Swahili, whatever it might be. So you might think you have a great African product for whatever reason you decide it's an African product, but actually no, there's no such thing. There really is. So it is so important to really do your homework. And then also from a saturation level, I mean, you're in various, so for example, James and Ricardo, you offer, when you're going to a territory, when you're looking at content, What is it that you look for? What is it that you're looking at to decide, okay, well, this is the product I should be launching with in this territory?
The content is different in every market. You're going to have your core genres, gaming, educational, health and fitness, what have you. But it's what works in that market. Let's use South Africa. Having a soccer service isn't necessarily, for example, going to be the biggest seller, even though there's the English Premiership. But if you have a rugby service, it could be a bigger seller because people prefer the rugby or the cricket. Plus, you've got the different cultures inside the territory. But you go to somewhere like Kenya, soccer could be bigger than anything else because they're more into their soccer and what have you. So, and then you look at the type of, we can all have a Disney game or a EA Sports game or something, but you actually might find from the research using tools like Impello, Avena, MCP, etc., that the games that are being promoted in that market are more in tune to what the market wants. You can have it in your deck, but it's not necessarily going to bring you the customers.
Yeah.
So you have to chop and change it and choose it and advertise it slightly different in each market.
Yeah.
And then you can find local services and bring the local content on. But, have you got African content? It doesn't necessarily mean it has to be African. It's what's the market
works in that market.
Or even in the Middle East and stuff. And then you've got to look at the rules of what games and content you can utilize. Is there any religious sectors? So, but it's the same genres across the board, pretty much. It's just how you market what piece of genre, what piece of content to a particular market, and what works. And sometimes what works for, say, some media won't work for baseball. And that's why we have different marketing teams and we have different strategies on how we advertise and how we promote. And there's definitely services that Basebone has over the years that we've launched and been pleasantly surprised at the success of that service because you've done some testing on, oh, this might actually work, and then someone's buying it and more people are buying it. And then actually you have network operators will come to you and say, we want this inside our portal because this is what you're doing. Yeah. One thing that a lot of people, I think, make a mistake on with content is there's too much shoddy content in the market. And the networks and the consumer are wanting something more in terms of quality. If you have something unique, the market's going to be interested in it. If you have something like, there's plenty of territories where you submit a gaming service. Nope, we don't want any more games. It's a saturated piece of content market.
But this is exactly the point I wanted to make. To, what you said is, I think there's two types of content when you're talking about what's the content. One is the content that the operator likes and says, here's your contract, sign, and here's your whatever, here's your revenue share. The operator likes the content, and the content that in reality you can sell to the consumer.
Yes.
Yes. And can market and will actually convert. And those are not always the Venn diagram of where those two products meet.
Absolutely.
There's not always a big place.
But I think what's interesting in this whole space and the way our industry is evolving, regardless of the market, is that companies like ourselves, Sam Media, we're starting to find niches that we excel in. And strategically, those are the products that we are taking as our premium products.
Yes.
And we're very proud of those products. We've got SingSpace coming to the market quite soon with our first mobile operator deployment. And it's a product that we're very proud of. Is it localized? No, but it can be. And I think that's the key over here. We've all got products that meet people's requirements. International stuff sells. People have access to YouTube. They listen to Spotify. No matter which market you're in, you're still exposed to international culture. So it's having those services at hand, but then the ability to localize. We do it in South Africa. Competitioning in certain markets is still very popular. So you bundle that with your subscription. What I am seeing more and more is it's the value proposition that you bring. Mobile operators, definitely our focus with them is to sell the incentive of localization.
Yes.
Because they want to encourage something from their local market.
Yeah. And also offer value to their customers. And I think quite a big thing at the moment, certainly in South Africa, is not just about revenues, it's about usage. So I know there's a big drive at the moment where the networks are actually looking at how much the products have actually been used. And so what would you say is a way to anyone on the panel to try and drive usage on your service? I mean, I suppose that comes through value. It's providing consumers with something that they want, but that's obviously all very good and well. How can we actually get them to use the service? Are there ways that you could assist in guiding partners to try and increase usage?
Experience, time. If I look at our Max product, that's been taken into the OTT environments by the networks because of its usage.
Yes.
Statistical data that's coming from it. They know that their customers are using it. The networks are now monitoring services inside their portfolio, whether it's on deck or off deck.
Yeah.
They're looking at it, and they're going through culling stages. If they don't like the content themselves or it's not performing, they will bring something else in that performs, because they are now, particularly in South Africa, they are now wanting to offer quality services to their consumers because they've had negative press or whatever over a period of time. But it's also the evolving markets. Yeah. We're seeing it, in other African continents. We're seeing it in the Middle East. The networks. Let's look at South Africa 10 years ago. Well, let's look at, say, UAE. There was 250 service providers on one network a month or so ago. There's 8 today.
Yeah.
The networks are whittling it down to people that are going to bring it in. I mean, I've had interesting conversations with networks where they say, we like that, and actually, that's what we would buy ourselves. No, that's what they're saying, but
yes, but they're not the target market. Yes. And that's always the conversation, because you'll have a situation where carriers sit in a boardroom and say, yeah, I don't know, but it's not Netflix, or I don't know, but it's not this. And I'm like, but you are not my target market. I'm not going to be marketing this to you or to anyone else in my office. And they need to also understand that a little bit.
But it goes back to the point that either you or Ricky said earlier, that gets you through the door. Yeah. You get the service up and running, and then you have the product in that. But you're already under the microscope of what you're doing and what you're offering.
Yeah. But I think going on with that, having the discussions with the mobile operators, they want to see a product life cycle.
Yeah.
So we're moving away from the, here's a service, there's content, I never change. Maybe in a year I'll add a few more videos. That business model, yes, it's still there, but it's slowly but surely fading out. The operators are getting involved in the fact that they want to see proper value. They know that we understand our customer better, but they want to make sure that the product that they're endorsing is going to have a proper product life cycle, a proper value proposition, costing. And that again brings in the two different approaches that we have as companies going into Africa. We can do partnerships with the mobile operators, or we can do the traditional aggregation model.
Yeah.
And that's a big change that's happening in the industry. Countries where you're seeing that they're starting to terminate the traditional subscription model, the premium partner with the mobile operator is still very popular.
Yes.
It's a handful, a select content base that they want to do business with. And that becomes the localization and developing those products specifically for their needs.
And not just for their products. So we recently staged the Global Carrier Billing Summit in Amsterdam, which is an event dedicated to, as the name suggests, carrier billing. And it's heavily attended by mobile network operators. So of the 150 people there, 50 were operators. We chatted to them. And what also came back is when we're choosing our content partners, choosing them on the basis of their content is just one part of it.
Yes.
It's becoming more and more the need for, it's almost like a one-stop shop. If I have to organize a wedding, I'm not going to go buy the dress at the one place and the flowers. Like people go to one place. So CPs that are actually propositioning themselves by going, we are also the experts in marketing our own product. Yes. We are also the experts in the data that's generated around the marketing of our product.
Yeah.
There's definitely, that's what they're saying.
Yeah. And I think, speaking from the South African market, definitely that's an issue at the moment. You've got all these traditional content providers who are now having to compete in a digital space that they're not used to. Previously they had a lot of network assistants assisting them with marketing, et cetera. It's not just enough that you have content. You need to have your marketing departments. You need to understand the scope. You need to understand the ecosystem in order for your product to work in that territory. And that's another thing, just also per territory, to understand what the ecosystem looks like. Even from a payment perspective, a lot of people here actually, the first thing they say to me is, do we get paid? Will we get paid? We hear South Africa, or we hear Africa are bad with payments. And yeah, some territories are, some aren't. Some you do get paid, but it's in 5-6 months. Some you get paid in 2 months, and you need to make sure that you understand that. You need to make sure you've got the cash flow to see you through. Because that can be crippling. If you thought you were going into a new market, you've spent a massive amount on advertising, and all of a sudden, you're unaware that it's going to take you 6 months to get that payment, that could cripple your business. And so don't go in blindly. Speak to the local partners. Understand what the processes are in those territories. And certainly, if it does seem good to be true, you're probably not speaking to the right person. So really, really do your homework and understand the entire ecosystem rather than just saying, I've got content, I want to go into this territory, these guys are using that person, let me try use them too. Really, it's not enough. It's important that you do your homework. Yeah. Would you tend to agree? James?
Yeah, well, I raised the point about payment terms earlier in terms of contractual. It ranges. I mean, South Africa, I think, on average is 65 days.
Yeah.
Kenya, I think, is on average 45, 50 days when the network paid out. But then you go to somewhere like the Middle East and you're talking 120 days in some markets. You're talking networks might not even pay you for 9 months, 12 months. And you've got to be able to sustain that income will come, but you've got to know how to market it, to manage that cash flow issue. Certain networks may pay bits and drabs, they may pay other people first, but it's key to understand what you're going into. And a lot of people that are in the markets have been there a while, and they have an understanding of it, and that's where MEF comes in, or WASPA comes in. There's the ability to be able to, or even these events, the ability to be able to talk to people to get an understanding of it and what actually works and what doesn't work.
And not just an understanding of things like, oh, in the contract the payment terms is this and whatever, but like an on-the-ground understanding. Like I saw it when I worked for a digital content provider, and I had to explain to the designers and the tech guys from a consumer perspective how this flow is going to look. Like, send people actually there to go and buy a SIM card and just actually sign up to your own product and see that, so for example, obviously in markets that are predominantly prepaid, the billing success rate is very low, right? So everyone sees, ooh, the billing success rate is low, let's try and increase the billing success rate. So in this instance, someone in the team, while I was on holiday, came up with the idea that let's put a button, right, a call to action. So if we get the DN back that says this person is out of credit, right, so the billing was unsuccessful, we'll send them to a page, and on that page will be a button, and via clicking on that button, that call to action, they'll be redirected to their bank's website where they can top up their credit, and then we can try to bill them again. And then I came back from holiday, and I didn't make myself very popular, because it's like, if you've actually ever visited this country or understand the market, then you know that, if I'm going to top up my account with 10 Rand airtime, I'm not going to do it with my debit card via, Absa's website. Obviously. So this whole exercise was pointless.
Yes.
So, just like get some like common sense on the ground, sort of, or speak to, your locals or other organizations that can help with it.
Well, that goes back to that point about 2 clicks. I remember, I've been at Baseball 14 years. I remember coming back from a trip to South Africa and said, USSD is really popular. Why did anyone do USSD? Well, the USSD is really popular in Kenya. We've actually been told to move to USSD. Oh, no, it doesn't work like that.
We used to deliberately switch off header enrichment to force a Wi-Fi flow so that we can have an MO or an MT sort of thing, because the consumers that came off, the subscribers that came in that way had a higher ARPU if you had A/B tested them in 2 pools than the one that came in via, ClickFlow, the be-all and end-all of ours. So you need to. So there's a little bit of out-of-the-box sort of thinking that.
You have to look at Kenya. Kenya went from SMS MO 12 years ago, they went to USSD,
Yeah.
and in the last week, they moved to two-click flows.
I did.
Yeah, just. It's all new to them.
You heard it here first.
But you have to go through anti-fraud providers.
Yeah, well, of course,
But you know, it's a constantly evolving. Every market's constantly evolving into something. And it doesn't say that USSD can work for a particular product. There's competitors in South Africa that only operate with USSD because it works for them. But again, it's going down to understanding your market, understanding your consumer base, understanding your product, and how does your product fit into that culture, society, or what have you.
Okay.
I think, I mean, getting set up in a market is one thing. I think a big challenge in Africa in general is the marketing costs. Google's penetration in a lot of African countries is still minimal. And in the markets where they predominant, their marketing costs are exorbitant. The CPAs that we look at in South Africa are extremely high. And there it comes down to, again, product, making sure customers want the product, and trying to make sure that you are controlling that user journey. So your own media buying team, understanding the traffic, and optimizing it as much as possible.
And the other thing, obviously, to consider is data in many African territories is also still incredibly, incredibly expensive. So that's also going to determine what type of products you're going to be offering consumers. So also something to bear in mind. Every year I've sort of attended either Mobile World Congress or Telemedia. There's a buzz country in Africa, like you have to go into this country. And then every year it sort of changes. And a couple of years ago it was Nigeria, then it's Kenya, etc. On this visit, I'm hearing Morocco, funny enough, Algeria. Would you agree? Are you hearing the same thing? Are these territories that you guys are looking at? Without giving all your secrets away?
I'm hearing Ethiopia.
You're hearing Ethiopia. Okay, so that's your buzzword.
Yeah, but I mean,
okay.
it's also just if you just like Google what's the fastest growing economy,
Yes.
and so I think
Yes.
it's not a completely. I mean, I don't know personally like anything about its DCB market,
Yes.
so I don't know, you know, if we were to look at that little checklist,
Yeah.
you know, if it's even, but it is the fastest.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
it doesn't come as a surprise that
Yes.
you're also hearing more and more content providers starting to look at it or consider it.
Okay. I see both James and
No,
Rick are very quiet.
so I mean,
You heard it here.
We're not giving away our secrets.
there are a lot of markets in Africa that are still interesting. When Anzelle said you throw away the checklist, no, the checklist still stays there because you still need to take the risk assumption of if I go into Ethiopia, it's a relatively new market, inflation, transferring money out, limited aggregation services, limited partners, two operators. So there's a lot of things that you need to take into account over there.
Yes.
Is it an interesting opportunity? Definitely. And most probably, if you're to ask me of the opportunities in Africa at the moment, it does just pure numbers. To a large extent, our business is still numbers. And that relates to the fact that ARPU in Africa is low.
Yes.
So we need to get substantial volume to actually validate our business.
Yeah.
But Nigeria is still there. I mean, it's one of those markets that has
200 million people in it.
But I think with all of these markets, you have to be concerned about inflation. I mean, that to me is one of the biggest challenges in Nigeria. The cost of what you're going to get your money out, the black market trading, if you're going that channel. But I go with Ethiopia as a very interesting prospect.
All right. So myself, I've been dealing with sort of an Ethiopian partner over the last couple of months, and they certainly have a roadmap on what they want their content to look like. So if you are considering, as they've mentioned, Ethiopia as a possible territory, just understand that there is a roadmap when it comes to content. I know education is quite high on their list. So value-added services that are genuine value adds is certainly a road that they seem to be going down.
And another thing, just thinking about now, like any market can be a super interesting market if you're the only player there.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? So that's the other thing. Like
Yeah.
you can also look at which markets are the ones that
Aren't
absolutely
penetrated,
no one
yes,
at
yes,
all is
yes,
talking
yes,
about.
yes.
and open up shop in Lesotho, although I'm sure someone's done that, but or wherever.
Yes.
By just establishing a good relationship with the carrier, doing a bit of a educational piece around, which is also something MEF does, but doing a bit of an educational piece about this is how we can set up, a secure subscription environment, we'll manage billings, this is the content we have, whatever. And then so what if there's a population of only, 10 million and a low GDP and whatever? Because if you're the only one, then that equation can still work.
Yeah.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions for us? Or anyone on the panel? Any questions? No one? Cool. Okay. Well, I hope that at least you can walk away with some sort of insight into the African market and understand that there are tools to assist. Don't do it blindly. Speak to your local aggregators. No one size fits all, and that's really what I want to say. And that's certainly that Africa is not a country, it's a continent with multiple territories, and it's really important to understand that. So I hope we were able to at least provide some guidance.
Thank you,
All right.
Jacqui.
Thanks.